On a winter night near Ravenna, January 10, 49 BCE, Julius Caesar stood at a shallow stream that marked the edge of Italy and weighed a choice that could ignite civil war or end his career in disgrace. The hinge was plain: cross the Rubicon with soldiers and break the rules, or stay north and accept political ruin. The Rubicon was a small river that separated his province from Italy proper, which meant taking troops across it was a direct challenge to Roman law and custom. He did not decide in a vacuum that night. The trigger was the Senate's order that he dismiss his army and return to Rome at once. The underlying causes were years of rivalry with Pompey and Caesar's fear that without office he would face hostile courts and bankruptcy. In the hours before the crossing, messengers rode in with news that tribunes who supported him had fled Rome for their lives. That mattered because tribunes were sacrosanct officials meant to be untouchable, and their flight signaled that politics had turned hard and unforgiving. Caesar had one legion with him at Ravenna, the 13th, about 5,000 men. His other forces were scattered across Gaul and along Alpine roads, too far to help in the next 48 hours. Winter rain made the roads heavy, which meant any march would be slow, and his food wagons would sink to the hubs if he pushed too fast. The law was a second constraint. A provincial commander held legal authority only in his province, and bringing troops into Italy put him outside that authority and exposed him to charges the instant he stepped on the southern bank. A third constraint was morale and money. The men were loyal but tired after long years in Gaul, and pay chests were never as full as soldiers wished in midwinter. There were alternatives. He could obey, disband the 13th, and walk into Rome as a private citizen to argue his case. But without immunity, he risked immediate prosecution, asset seizures, and the end of his political path. Or he could halt at the border and keep negotiating, sending letters to the Senate and to Pompey. But delay favored his opponents, who already controlled the official machinery and could raise levies across Italy while he waited. Therefore his choice narrowed to motion or surrender. That night, near midnight by some accounts, Caesar ordered the standard of the 13th raised and stepped into the river. Ancient writers disagree on his exact words. Some report the Greek phrase, "let the die be cast." Others suggest a Latin version. But all agree he took the step knowing it would be read as a declaration of war. The crossing itself was not dramatic in size. The stream was forded in minutes, the water cold around their calves, the current dark with winter runoff. What mattered was what lay 30 miles ahead along the coast, Ariminum, the first major town in Italy on the Via Aemilia, a road that led straight toward the heartland. Because speed would set the tone, he moved immediately. Scouts went ahead on the road, cohorts followed in silence. Couriers fanned out with letters framing his move as defense of the tribunes and the people's rights. By dawn, he entered Ariminum without a fight. The gates opened, either by surprise or by local calculation, that resistance with a small garrison made no sense in January against veterans hardened in Gaul. Next, he secured nearby posts, bridges, and grain depots. Each small step mattered because it told Italy's towns that the new reality had arrived and that the cost of opposing him would be paid soon, not in some distant season. In these first days, he kept his message simple. He said he sought negotiation, not blood, and that his march answered an unjust demand to strip him of command. That line was precise because it appealed to Romans weary of factional fights, and it placed the burden for escalation on his rivals. News ran down the peninsula faster than the legions. In Rome, the consuls and many senators heard that the Rubicon had been crossed and that Ariminum was in Caesar's hands. Panic followed because the city had few troops ready, and winter made mustering slower. The Senate empowered Pompey to organize defense, and then many officials left the city to regroup in the south. Within days, magistrates, clerks, and noble families streamed toward Capua, and then on to Brundisium, taking the treasury keys and leaving Rome politically hollow. This was the immediate outcome. Caesar's single winter march forced the Roman government to abandon its capital and concede him the initiative without a pitched battle. He pressed the advantage, but still measured his pace. Because Italy's weather, roads, and supply lines punished haste, he gathered more troops from Gaul and invited towns to accept his terms rather than resist. The choice to cross made those offers credible. It showed he would not sit still while his enemies prepared, and it allowed him to present himself as the side offering order rather than flight. We should remember what he could not know that night. He could not know how fast Pompey would retreat. He could not know which towns would open their gates and which would resist to the last. He only knew his window was narrow, his opponents had legal cover, and winter could stall him into failure if he hesitated. Because of that, he kept his objective for the first week modest: secure a base in Italy, keep the march disciplined, and turn political shock into leverage. There was no hero's charge, no theatrical speech to the cameras of history, only deliberate movement from riverbank to town to road. It worked because the opening of a conflict is often decided by who seizes momentum when institutions are slow to move. Had he chosen to obey and return alone, his fate likely would have been decided in courtrooms he did not control. Had he paused to negotiate at the river, Pompey would have used the time to assemble legions in greater number and block the passes, which meant Caesar might end up trapped between hostile walls and the winter sea. By stepping forward, he traded legal exposure for practical control. The 13th West loyalty and the shock of midwinter movement offset the risk long enough to force new facts on the ground. Historians quarrel about shades of motive. Ambition, fear, and the defense of allies all color the accounts. But they converge on one point: the crossing compressed years of rivalry into a single irreversible act. Within the week, emissaries still talked, but the shape of the struggle was set. Rome sat anxious and half-empty. Pompey organized in the south. Caesar claimed to be restoring the rights of tribunes as he advanced. From this small river, a much larger tide rose. Legions would soon march from Spain to Greece, and famous names would collide far from Ravenna. But the turning point itself fits within days: one night's decision, one day's march, and the immediate hollowing of Rome's authority. The long-tail constitutional consequence was this: it hardened the pattern that real power flowed through commanders with loyal armies, and that pattern cleared the path for one man, first Caesar, then Augustus, to concentrate authority beyond the old republic's limits. That winter night near Ravenna still matters, because it shows how law, logistics, weather, and timing can focus into one decisive step that makes all other options fade. If you found this turning point compelling, like and subscribe for more from Vanguard Law.